Grace and peace to you, church. It is so good to be with you. Have you ever been in a moment where you know what it is that you truly need, but yet it seems like that's the last thing that you want to do and the last thing that you're going to do, and you're going to continue on the path that you have set forth before you, and you're going to continue to strive, drink some more coffee, and just keep going, even though you know what's best for you and it needs to be probably the opposite of what you're actually doing. So I remember in college, we were all zealous and excited freshman year. We don't have our parents there to tell us what time we have to go to bed. We don't have anybody telling us when we have to do our homework other than getting it done in time to, actually get turned in or studying for the test. And one of the first things that seems to go out the window for a college student is sleep. Who cares? You'll sleep when we're dead, right? As my dad always says. But yet, oftentimes, somebody would end up getting sick at some point or another. And our RA at the time, she was wonderful, and she was very practical and very real. And she figured out, and she knew exactly that this is one of the biggest issues when it comes to especially freshman students, but college students in general, is the lack of sleep that we had. And so her response when we got sick, because we'd end up going to her because it's our first sickness without mom, and we don't know what we're doing, and we're kind of starting to freak out because who's going to bring us the OJ, and who's going to tell us to remember to hydrate, and whatever, right? And so we'd go to her, we'd go to Claire, and we're like, Claire, we're not feeling well. What do I do? And so her response 95% of the time was to give us a Benadryl, because the Benadryl would just knock us out, and she would say, hey, take this, drink some water, and go to bed. Just go to bed, get some rest. And so we would do just that. Benadryl seems to knock most people out for at least 8 hours. Me, it seems to knock me out for 10. And so she'd give us a Benadryl, and you go to bed and you get some sleep, and you realize that you haven't slept more than 4 hours and, too many days and too many weeks. And yet often what it was that our body just really truly needed was to slow down, was to rest, was to stop, was to sleep, was to let our bodies just recover from what was going on in life. And yet it is one of the most difficult things, it seems like, for college students and even us as adults. So we have been journeying through Exodus for many weeks now, and it has been an incredible journey to watch as they have gone from being slaves. Moses shows up, God uses a man in some incredible ways, continues to prove his glory and his abundance and his grace and his love and his power and his majesty over and over and over again. And he sets the Israelites free, and they head out and they march out, and yet over and over again, God has to repeat himself and saying the same things. And I think this is so very, very true to us, even to this day. So tonight we're going to start at chapter 35, and we're kind of looking over these last 5 chapters if you want to join me. So here at the beginning of 35, Moses has just come down from the mountain, and he has spent 40 days and 40 nights on Mount Sinai with God. And so he comes back down and he gives this command to the people, to the community. He assembles all of the Israelites, and he says to them, "These are the things the Lord has commanded you to do. For 6 days, work is to be done, but on the 7th day shall be your holy day, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it must be put to death. Do not light a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day." So this is the first thing that Moses reminds the people. And actually, I looked it up. Moses, in Exodus, we see the Sabbath referenced 14 times. 14 times in the 40 chapters, we see it referenced 14 times. Over and over and over again. And when you actually look at the Bible as a whole, Sabbath is mentioned 173 times. 173 times. Can you believe it? It just amazes me that it's so many times. But yet, it is one of the biggest things that I think we still struggle with to this day. Pastor Ryan preached an incredible message on Sabbath. As we looked at it back in chapter 20, I think it was. And we looked at the more details of Sabbath and what it meant to hold that day and the rest that you and I need as humans. We need rest. We need to Shabbat. We are designed to stop, to cease, to do no more at some point. And yet, the Israelites had to be reminded of this. They come from a system that has had them working for days and days and days with no rest. Pharaoh was completely consumed with production and making and continuing to do all the things over and over again. And so he has, masters and task workers who are continuing to make the slaves do just that. And so they've come from this system that constantly goes and goes and goes. And they've had to continue to work over and over again. And yet God is saying, no. That is not how you are designed. For 6 days, you are to work. And on the 7th day is when you stop. And we saw that when they headed out into the desert, when the Israelites headed out into the desert, they got manna from the sky for 6 days. 6 days it fell and they received manna. And they were told on the 6th day, you will get double portions because there will be nothing on the 7th day. Because on the 7th day, you are to rest. You are to stop. You are to slow down. We live in a consumer-driven, consumption-driven, work until you are bones culture that has continued to increase with anxiety and stress and depression and all sorts of different issues. And so much of it, I truly believe, comes back to the lack of rest. We have everything at our fingertips. We can binge multiple shows on Netflix at any given time. We can go through the fast food place and we can get, food instantly, and we can shop online and have it delivered to our home in 2 days. And yet we don't know how to stop and to slow down. And so for 14 different times, Sabbath is mentioned. And Moses, again, before he goes on to talk about the tabernacle and the things that they're going to need to build this tabernacle, he says, for 6 days you work, and for the 7th day you rest. And so I want you to really do an evaluation, because like I mentioned, Pastor Ryan preached a message weeks ago, just a little over a month ago, about Sabbath. And are you creating rest in your life? Are you creating space for rest to happen in your life? And so in the last month, have you Shabbated? Have you ceased at least 1 day a week? Have you stopped? Have you allowed for God to show up in the midst of the chaos of life and give you rest? We operate in an upside down kingdom. And this is one of those things when oftentimes we think that if I just keep working, if I just keep doing, if I just keep producing, then I will reach some magnitude. But it's never enough. It's just never enough, right? You constantly keep going. There's constantly something more to be done. There is truly never an end to it. I struggle so hard with Sabbath. The irony that this is where we were at, and this is what God continues to put on my heart, is comical in some ways, because I struggle with Sabbath. I struggle to slow down. I am a go-getter. I am an achiever. I have to have on the list. I literally have to put on my list, rest. Today's task is to rest so that I feel like I have accomplished something, even if it's accomplishing rest. That is me. That is my personality. In college, I had mentors who that was their thing. It was this constant reminder of, hey, you have to learn how to rest. And ministry is one of the most difficult places because there's always constantly something that needs to be done. Many of you work in spaces, medical fields, where there is constantly somebody who is sick. There is constantly somebody who is ill and who needs assistance. And there's always constantly something else that can be done. But when we don't rest, we end up paying for it. And I love Trevor asked the very hard question of how many of us would be put to death at this point because we have failed it. We have failed to Shabbat, to find rest and peace in our life. I know I would definitely be one. I am one who does. I constantly do. And so I want to challenge you, church, that what is your rest looking like? What is your Sabbath looking like? Because I think when we truly begin to let go of the chaos of the work, of the consumption, when we begin to let go of that, this is where God begins to show up. It's where God gets to make things happen that seem completely out of hand, seem like they will never get accomplished. Those are the spaces that in which we really see God show up, because he's provided. He's provided more than enough. We operate in an upside down kingdom where there is more than enough in this space. There's a more than enough of what it is that you need here in this kingdom. But when we don't stop, when you don't pause, how are you going to see it? How are you going to experience it? How are you going to allow it to transform your life? So as I was reading on this subject, I loved this, and I was reminded that this takes practice. I know it sounds crazy, but rest takes practice. There's a lot of things. Everything needs to take practice. We need to begin to create rhythms and routines of this in our life so that we are shaped and we are molded by these routines, by the kingdom of God, right? We have to be able to allow this to happen let this into our life. Josh and I have been doing the 75 hard challenge, and it is tough. Just ask Joel and Robin. They did it too. It is tough. It is hard, but it's this idea of beginning to create rhythms in your life and the practice of these habits in your life. And so rest is just the same thing. And so tonight I kind of want to challenge you on a bit of a smaller scale, because sometimes we try and bite off too much, and we think, well, how am I going to take a day if I've been working for so long, for 7 days and constantly? How am I going to even find small pieces, and all of a sudden take a whole day? That's outrageous. I've got all these other things that need to happen. And so I want to challenge you. 1/3 of your life should be spent sleeping. Sleeping is one of the most critical things that the human body needs. At some point, you need to sleep. You need to rest. You need to cease and allow your body to heal, to recover, to process what has happened in the day, process what is going on, to be able to regulate what's happening in your body. We need to sleep. And yet oftentimes in this culture of craziness and chaos and busyness, we are totally over caffeinated. We're totally over scheduled and booked. And we oftentimes will just let our sleep be one of the last things that actually gets to happen. And so church, I even want to simply start there. And I want to challenge you that if you haven't had Sabbath well in your life, and if you're not practicing it even on the daily, what would it look like for you to get a little extra sleep? Scientifically, they say everybody's supposed to get about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. That's what your body needs to function well. 1/3 of your life should be spent sleeping. Ceasing all things, allowing God to show up in the midst of the craziness and to begin to redeem and begin to heal and begin to work, and allow for that grace to show up in our lives. And so I want to challenge you to maybe even just start there. Start with just a little bit of time. Just 8 hours. What would it look like for you to spend that? Because really, when we begin to choose to do anything other than sleep, we begin to notice what it is that we are loving, we are worshiping, what we're idling. We begin to allow for those things to shape us more than what it is that really needs to be shaping us. And Sabbath and rest shape us. It causes us to live in this upside down kingdom that resists the chaos, that resists the anxiety, that resists the chaos that happens in the world. And so we live in this upside down kingdom, and we allow for that to shape us, to form us. So instead of allowing for the social media, for the work, for the whatever it is, what would it look like for you to begin to actually get some rest, to get some sleep, to starting there and allowing that to shape you in some incredible and different ways? So I know we are quickly running out of time, but I felt like I needed to reiterate this because we live in such a chaotic and crazy world. And there is so much happening around us that feels overwhelming at times. I'll be honest with you. It is overwhelming to watch the news. It is overwhelming to continue to debate and to argue and to whatever it is that we're doing. The world is in a chaotic state. And so we must resist the chaos and choose to be shaped by God first. Choose to be shaped by Sabbath and by rest. It is mentioned 14 times in these 40 chapters. It is mentioned 173 times. It's a commandment of ours. And it's one that we need to be reminded, hey, take a Benadryl, slow down, and get some rest, and see what that can do to shape and to shift your life. So to kind of finish us off though, in the last of these chapters, we see the tabernacle being built. We see the work that gets put into it, and there's so many intricate details. It's beautiful, and the silver and the gold that get put in here, and the specifications, and God is a God of beauty. I truly believe that you can't look at the scenery behind me and not think that God values beauty. And you read this story of the way that everything is to be put together as you finish this off. And I love this moment here at the end. Exodus finishes with this. So in chapter 40, verse 34, then the cloud of God covered the tent of the meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of the meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the glory of God filled the tabernacle. And all the travels of the Israelites, whenever the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle, they would set out. But the cloud did not lift, then they did not set out until the day it did lift. So the cloud of the Lord over the tabernacle by day, and the fire was in the cloud by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel during all of their travels. God comes and dwells among them. God comes and dwells in the tabernacle, in this meeting of this space, and fills it and says, here, we're going to pause here. And then he lifts, and they follow the Spirit and this lifting of the cloud. And so, church, let's be a church that allows for the Spirit to guide us, to allow for the disciplines of this upside down kingdom to shape us, to mold us, so that we can go and continue to do what God needs us to do, so that we can be filled with the Spirit, so that we can rest when we need to, so that we have the ability and the strength to continue on to do the things that we need to do. We are givers as part of the kingdom, but we can't neglect our own needs in the midst of giving. If you've flown on a plane, then you know they say that if the oxygen masks were to come down, please put your own mask on first before assisting anybody else. Because if you don't have the oxygen and you die, then you're useless to everybody around you. So remember, you must take care of you. And so what would it look like for your life to be shaped by Sabbath? What would it look like for you to practice the daily rhythm of rest, of sleep, of allowing God into this space so that you can be shaped and to be formed by this upside down kingdom? Grace and peace, church.